The jungle was too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as the seaplane cut through the humid air, descending toward the glittering emerald island below. The group of friends, 7 in total, pressed their faces to the windows, marveling at the untamed beauty of the place that would soon become their nightmare. "Paradise," said Mark with a grin, running a hand through his messy blonde hair. "Told you guys it was worth the trip." His girlfriend, Elena, smiled weakly, clutching her camera. She wasn't so sure. Something about the island looked wrong. The trees were too thick, the shadows too dark, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with an almost invisible weight, like it was hiding something ancient and angry. They had come to Isla Caligo, a remote island off the coast of Panama, known mostly for its uncharted rainforests and an abandoned research facility rumored to have been closed down after a chemical spill. The group had rented a private cabin near the edge of the jungle, planning to relax, hike, and, according to Mark, disconnect from the noise of civilization. The plane touched down on a glassy lagoon, and as they stepped out onto the creaking wooden dock, the thick scent of earth, salt, and decay hit them all at once. "Smells like something died out here," muttered Jason, their self-appointed skeptic. He adjusted his sunglasses and kicked a piece of driftwood. "Probably a raccoon or something." "Or a body," joked Sam, the youngest and most impulsive of the group. Elena forced a laugh, but her stomach twisted. As they loaded their bags into the jeep waiting at the edge of the jungle, a man appeared from behind a cluster of palm trees. He was tall, lean, and wearing a sun-bleached uniform with the faded logo of Tsinbio Research Division barely visible on his chest. His eyes were distant, hollow. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a voice as dry as the dust beneath their feet. Mark raised an eyebrow. "We're just tourists, man. Got the permits and everything." The man's jaw tightened. "Permits don't protect you from what's left behind." Before anyone could ask what he meant, he turned and vanished into the tree line. The driver shrugged. "Local weirdos," he said in Spanish-accented English, forcing a smile. "Don't worry. The jungle plays tricks on people's minds." The jeep rattled down a narrow dirt road lined with ancient trees. Vines hung like nooses, insects hummed, and somewhere deep in the foliage, something screamed. It wasn't human. They reached the cabin just before dusk, a weathered structure overlooking the lagoon, surrounded by dense, suffocating greenery. Inside, it was surprisingly cozy. Wooden beams, soft lantern light, and a large patio facing the jungle. That night, they drank, laughed, and told ghost stories under the soft hiss of the rain. But even as laughter filled the room, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. Every time she looked toward the jungle, she thought she saw movement, just beyond the trees, something crouched low, breathing. At midnight, while the others slept, she stepped out onto the porch. The jungle was alive with sound, chirping, croaking, the rustle of unseen wings. Then, silence. Her breath hitched. From the shadows emerged a figure, small, hunched, and trembling. A monkey. It was thin, almost skeletal, its fur patchy and matted with something dark. Its eyes were huge, gleaming red in the moonlight. It watched her, its chest heaving as though it had run for miles. "Hey there, little guy," she whispered. The monkey tilted its head. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like any animal she'd ever heard, it spoke. "Elena." She stumbled backward, heart pounding. "What the hell?" The monkey screeched, a shrill, unnatural sound that sliced through the night air. The lights in the cabin flickered, and from somewhere deep in the jungle came an answering scream, louder, lower, and full of rage. The others rushed out, half drunk and confused. "What happened?" Mark shouted, scanning the darkness. Elena's voice trembled. It said my name." Jason laughed nervously. "It's a jungle monkey, Elena. They mimic sounds, right? But none of them slept that night." The jungle noises grew stranger, like whispers carried on the wind, like footsteps circling the cabin. By morning, the monkey was gone, leaving behind claw marks on the porch railing. Deep ones. They decided to hike the next day to the ruins of the old research facility, the one Mark had mentioned. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe arrogance, but part of them wanted to prove there was nothing to fear. As they disappeared into the dense green heart of the island, the air seemed to grow thicker, heavier. The jungle closed around them like a living thing, breathing, watching, waiting. None of them noticed the small figure in the treetops, following their every move, its eyes glowing faintly, its teeth bared in a grin that was almost human. The experiment hadn't died. It had evolved. And now, it was hungry. The jungle swallowed them whole. Each step deeper into the tangled green maze made it harder to breathe. The air felt alive, thick, hot, humming with unseen life. The smell of damp earth and rot pressed into their lungs. The trees twisted overhead, blotting out the sun until only scattered rays of gold leaked through the canopy like bleeding light. Elena walked at the back of the group, her camera slung around her neck. Every few minutes she'd stop, turning her lens toward the rustling leaves, convinced she saw something move. A shadow. A flicker of fur. Eyes. Mark led the way, machete in hand, cutting through the vines. "It should be just another half-mile," he said, voice strained. "The map said the lab's near a waterfall." Jason groaned. "We're hiking through mosquito hell to look at an abandoned building that probably collapsed years ago." "Great vacation, dude." Sam smirked. "Hey, maybe we'll find that monkey again. Get him to say your name this time." "Huh," Jason muttered. "I'm serious. That thing last night wasn't normal." Elena stopped suddenly. "You all heard it, right? It said my name." The group fell silent. Even the jungle seemed to pause, listening. Then Mark forced a laugh. Probably an echo or a sound illusion. Parrots mimic people all the time. But Elena wasn't convinced. That voice hadn't been mimicry. It had been intentional. After another hour of trudging through mud and vines, they found it, the facility. It loomed out of the jungle like the bones of some dead god. A sprawling concrete complex overtaken by vines and moss, its walls cracked and bleeding rust. The words symbiogenetics were faintly visible above the main doorway. "Holy crap," Sam whispered. "This is like something out of a horror movie." Jason rolled his eyes. "Let's hope it doesn't end like one." They stepped inside. The air was cooler, but stale, like it hadn't been breathed in decades. Old papers littered the floor, curling with age. Glass tanks lined the walls, most shattered. Inside a few, murky fluid sloshed, and dark shapes floated, things that had once been animals, now warped, deformed. Elena lifted her camera and snapped a picture. The flash illuminated a nearby wall, revealing claw marks gouged deep into the concrete. Long, uneven. Too large for a monkey. Mark ran his hand over them, his face pale. Whatever made this, was strong. They moved deeper into the building, their footsteps echoing. Strange symbols were scrawled across the walls, half equations, half madness. Notes were scattered on tables, filled with fragmented words, subject 9, enhanced neural patterns. Aggressive cognition. Behavioral shift, possession. Possession. Sam read aloud. "What the hell does that mean?" Jason snorted. "Probably a scientist who lost it out here. I mean, this place is creepy enough to drive anyone nuts." They reached a locked steel door at the end of the corridor. Mark found a crowbar near a rusted desk and pried it open. The hinges screamed in protest as the door gave way. Behind it was a lab. Rows of cages lined the room, each filled with bones. Metal tables stood in the center, restraints still clamped shut as if waiting for something to return. And in the corner, a massive broken tank. Inside was a small pile of straw and rotted fabric, like a nest. Then came the smell. Rot. Copper. Wet fur. Elena gagged, covering her mouth. Something died here. No, Jason said quietly. Something lived here. A sound came from the ceiling. A faint scratching, like claws on metal. They froze. Did you hear that? Sam whispered. The scratching grew louder, faster. Then a drop of something thick and dark fell onto Jason's shoulder. He looked up. From the air vent above, two glowing red eyes stared down at him. He stumbled backward just as a blur of black fur dropped from the ceiling, landing hard on all fours. The creature was smaller than a man, but its limbs were elongated, its mouth stretched too wide, lined with human-like teeth. Patches of skin showed through its matted fur, raw and pulsating. It hissed, a sound that seemed to echo in their minds. Holy sh. Mark swung the crowbar. The creature moved faster than thought, latching onto his arm. Its claws sank deep, ripping flesh. He screamed, blood spraying the wall. Jason grabbed a metal tray and smashed it against the thing's head. It released Mark and scuttled up the wall, vanishing into the shadows. Elena pulled Mark toward the door. We need to get out of here. They ran. Their footsteps thundered through the empty halls as the creature's shrieks followed, bouncing from wall to wall. Lights flickered to life for the first time in years, one by one, as though the building itself were waking up. By the time they burst into the open air, Mark was pale and trembling. His arm was torn open, flesh shredded. Jason ripped his shirt and wrapped it around the wound. That wasn't a monkey, he said breathlessly. That thing, it looked wrong. It looked aware, Elena whispered. Like it knew who we were. Behind them, deep in the facility, something moved through the halls, slowly, deliberately. The lights inside flickered again, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. And then, faintly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, came a sound that froze their blood. A voice, raspy, distorted, calling out from the dark. Iluna. The rain came hard that night. Thunder cracked across the island, and the wind howled through the trees as the group huddled inside the cabin, trying to make sense of what had happened. The lantern light flickered over their faces, pale, drawn, terrified. Mark sat in the corner, shivering. His bandaged arm throbbed beneath layers of makeshift gauze. The bite was worse than any of them had realized, deep, ragged, almost surgical. The flesh around it was dark and swollen, veins crawling up toward his shoulder like black vines. Mark, we need to clean that properly, Elena said, kneeling beside him. She could see the infection spreading under his skin, lines of angry red radiating from the wound. It's fine, he muttered, eyes unfocused. Just need rest. Jason shook his head. That thing nearly took your arm off. We have to get help. The pilot's coming back in 3 days, we can't wait that long. Sam paced by the window, peering into the rain. We could try hiking to the other side of the island. There's supposed to be a Coast Guard outpost. Through that jungle? Jason snapped. We'd be dead before dawn. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room. For a moment, Elena thought she saw something outside, something small, crouched by the tree line, watching them. But when she blinked, it was gone. They argued for another hour, voices growing sharper, fear leaking into every word. Eventually, exhaustion won. They took turns keeping watch while the others tried to sleep. By midnight, the rain had eased. The jungle whispered. Elena sat near Mark, who was sweating and muttering in his sleep. She reached out to check his forehead, and froze. His skin was burning hot. Mark, she whispered. Hey, wake up. His eyes shot open. For a split second, she saw something wrong in them. The pupils were slit, like an animal's. He stared at her, expression blank, then smiled, a slow, unnatural curve of his lips. Elena, he said softly. Her heart stuttered. The way he said her name, it wasn't his voice. It was the same rasping tone she'd heard from the creature in the facility. She stumbled backward, knocking over a lantern. Jason jolted awake, grabbing a flashlight. "What's going on?" Mark stood up. The bandages on his arm were soaked through, pulsing faintly. The veins beneath his skin writhed like living things. "Stay back," Elena warned. But Mark didn't seem to hear. He tilted his head, almost curiously, as blood trickled from his nose. Then he lunged. Jason barely managed to block him, slamming the flashlight into Mark's face. They crashed into a table, sending bottles and tools flying. Mark snarled, a deep, guttural sound that wasn't human. "Get him off me!" Jason shouted. Sam grabbed a chair and swung it. The wood splintered across Mark's back, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he turned, his face twisted, veins bulging, mouth stretched wide enough to show teeth far sharper than before. He lunged again, pinning Sam to the floor. Elena grabbed the crowbar from earlier and struck him across the shoulder. Mark collapsed, convulsing violently. When it was finally over, he lay still. His chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. Elena was shaking. "Oh my God, what's happening to him?" Jason crouched beside the body, his hands trembling. "It's that bite. Whatever that thing was, it's in him." The power flickered. Somewhere outside, a distant howl echoed through the night, low, wet, and close. Sam scrambled to the window. "There's something out there." Elena joined him, scanning the tree line. The rain had stopped, but the jungle seemed to move. Branches shifted though there was no wind. Shapes darted between the trees. Dozens of small eyes glimmered faintly in the dark. "Monkeys," Jason whispered. "They're watching us." But these weren't normal monkeys. Their movements were too synchronized, too aware. The moment the flashlight beam hit them, they scattered, vanishing into the undergrowth with inhuman speed. Elena backed away, panic clawing at her chest. "We have to leave. Now." Jason turned to argue, but stopped. His eyes widened. Mark was gone. The spot where he'd been lying was empty, except for a smear of blood leading out the back door. They rushed outside, the damp air hitting their skin like ice. The jungle was silent again. No chirping. No rustling. Just silence. Then came the sound, something moving fast through the trees, branches cracking, followed by a scream that didn't belong to any animal. "Run!" Elena shouted. They tore through the darkness, branches whipping their faces. Behind them, something followed, heavy, fast, relentless. Sam tripped, scraping his knee, but Jason yanked him back to his feet. "Keep going." They reached the lagoon just as the clouds broke open again, lightning flashing across the sky. For a split second, they saw him, Mark, standing on the opposite bank. His skin was gray, his eyes glowing faintly red. The infection had spread across his entire body, veins bulging like black ropes beneath his skin. He looked at them, and smiled. "Elena," he whispered. Even from across the water, they heard it. Then he dropped to all fours and vanished into the trees, his movements jerky and unnatural. The storm swallowed the sound of his retreat, but the echoes of that voice lingered in their minds. Elena turned to the others, trembling. "It's spreading. Whatever they made in that lab, it's not just a monster. It's a disease." And in the shadows beyond the lagoon, dozens of red eyes blinked open, one by one. The morning came without sunlight. A thick gray fog hung over the jungle, swallowing the trees and turning the lagoon into a still, colorless mirror. The group hadn't slept, none of them could. Every sound outside the cabin made them flinch, the crack of branches, the rustle of leaves, the faint chatter that sounded almost conversational. Elena sat on the floor with her camera in her lap, replaying the footage she'd captured the day before. Between the static and the shaking lens, she caught a brief frame of the creature leaping from the ceiling, a blur of fur, teeth, and eyes that burned with intelligence. When she paused the video, she could swear its gaze was locked directly on hers. Jason was pacing again. "We can't stay here," he muttered. "It knows where we are." "Hell, they all do now." Sam sat by the window, staring at the fog. "Mark's still out there." Elena shook her head. "That thing isn't Mark anymore." Jason looked out at the jungle, his jaw tight. "If we stay, we die. If we go, we might have a shot." So they packed a flashlight, a machete, Elena's camera, and a small backpack of food. The silence outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. They stepped into the fog. The air was cold and damp, heavy with the stench of decay. As they followed a faint trail toward the mountain ridge, the jungle seemed to shift around them. The trees creaked like old bones. Somewhere far off, something screamed, a long, animalistic cry that faded into a strange, echoing laughter. They moved in silence for nearly an hour before Jason stopped abruptly. "Look." Up ahead, the fog thinned, revealing a clearing. At its center stood a figure, human in shape but hunched, twitching. Its back was to them, its body covered in coarse, dark hair. Elena's breath caught. "Mark." He turned. His face was barely human now, jaw elongated, skin stretched, eyes glowing red. His teeth were black with blood. When he smiled, it was almost tender. "Elena," he rasped. Jason raised the machete. "Don't come any closer." Mark tilted his head, the motion eerily animal. His fingers flexed, bones cracking. And then he dropped to all fours. The sound that tore from his throat was no longer human. "Run!" They bolted, crashing through vines and roots, the fog twisting around them. The sound of pursuit was immediate, branches snapping, snarls echoing through the trees. Elena's lungs burned. She could hear Jason behind her, shouting her name, and Sam panting, crying out when something brushed past his leg. The jungle erupted around them. From the treetops came more of them, small, fast, screeching in unison. The sound was unbearable, like metal scraping bone. Shapes darted above, silhouettes leaping between branches. One landed in front of them. It wasn't Mark, but it had once been something similar. Its skull was elongated, its eyes milky white, its mouth split open like a wound. It screamed and lunged. Jason swung the machete. The blade connected with a wet crack. The creature shrieked, collapsing in a tangle of limbs and black blood that hissed against the earth. But more were coming. They ran until their legs gave out, finally stumbling into a ravine. Water trickled from the rocks, forming a narrow stream. They collapsed, gasping for air. Jason leaned against a boulder, trembling. "We can't outrun them forever." Elena was staring at her hands, shaking, bloody from the thorns. "They're multiplying," she whispered. "Whatever they did in that lab, it's spreading through the ecosystem. The monkeys, the humans, Mark, it's all one thing now." Sam wiped his face, eyes wide. "Then how do we stop it?" Before anyone could answer, the jungle above them erupted with movement. Leaves rained down. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of small figures crawled through the trees, their red eyes glimmering in the fog. They weren't attacking. Not yet. They were watching. Studying. Jason gripped the machete tighter. "They're waiting for something." And then they heard it, distant at first, but growing louder. A deep, rhythmic thudding, like something massive moving through the forest. Trees cracked. Birds scattered in terrified flocks. Elena's voice broke. "What is that?" The ground shook. Roots tore from the earth. Out of the fog stepped something colossal, an abomination that defied nature. It moved like an ape but was easily the size of a car, its body a grotesque patchwork of fur, sinew, and metal implants. Tubes pulsed beneath its skin, and where its face should have been was a mess of bone and exposed muscle. The smaller creatures shrieked in unison, bowing their heads. Jason's whisper was barely audible. "Oh, God! That's the Alpha." The thing turned its head toward them. Its nostrils flared. And then, it smiled. The fog swallowed the jungle in silence before it charged. They ran. The ground split beneath their feet, trees falling like matchsticks as the monstrous hybrid tore through the forest after them. It was intelligent, hurting them, forcing them deeper toward the heart of the island. When they finally stumbled into a narrow cave, they collapsed inside, panting. Outside, the forest trembled under the Alpha's roars. Elena clutched her camera to her chest, whispering, "We were never supposed to find this place. We're part of the experiment now." The jungle went still again. The only sound left was breathing, human and otherwise. And somewhere in the distance, a familiar voice called out through the fog, distorted and mocking. "Elena, come back." The cave was colder than the jungle, silent, damp, and heavy with the smell of minerals and decay. The entrance was narrow, but once they crawled through, the walls opened into a vast hollow chamber that shimmered faintly with wet rock and strange luminescent moss. For a few moments, the group just sat there, catching their breath. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with dirt and fear. Elena's hands shook as she tried to light the lantern. When it flickered on, shadows leapt across the walls, making it look like the stone itself was breathing. Jason dropped the machete beside him and slumped against the wall. "We're trapped," he said flatly. "If that thing finds the entrance, we're done." "It's not safe to stay still," Elena said quietly. "We need to keep moving, find another way out." Sam crouched near a pool of water, his reflection rippling in the faint light. "Do you think there's another exit?" Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure. "There has to be. The air's still moving, I can feel a draft." The sound of dripping water echoed in the distance, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. They followed the draft through a narrow tunnel that sloped deeper into the earth. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell became, metallic, like blood mixed with something chemical. The walls here weren't natural stone anymore. They were smooth. Artificial. Jason stopped and ran his hand across the wall. "Concrete," he whispered. "This isn't just a cave. The lab extends down here." Elena felt a chill crawl up her spine. They built underground. They reached a steel door embedded in the rock, half-rusted but still intact. Jason pulled it open, and the hinges screamed. Beyond it lay a corridor lined with flickering lights that hadn't been on for years. Somehow, the power still hummed faintly, like a dying heart that refused to stop beating. The walls were covered in mold and stains. Old warning signs read Biohazard, Neural Enhancement Division, and Project Primate. They walked carefully, their footsteps echoing too loudly. On one side of the corridor, a thick glass window revealed a dark laboratory filled with overturned tables and shattered cages. Inside, something small lay curled on the floor. Elena raised her flashlight, and froze. It was a skeleton, but not fully human. Its hands were elongated, its skull stretched and ridged. The bones looked twisted, like the result of a body being remade from the inside out. Sam gagged. What the hell were they doing here? Jason pointed at the control console near the glass. Maybe we can find out. He pressed a few buttons, and the screen flickered to life. Static filled the room, followed by fragments of a video log. Dr. Laird, Entry 52. Neural recombination experiment, Subject 9 is showing higher cognitive function than expected. Motor control improvement, aggression threshold, unstable. The hybrid genome is static. We've gone too far. It's learning faster than we can contain it. The Others are mimicking speech, behavior, like a hive mind forming. This isn't evolution. It's possession. Static. If anyone finds this, burn everything. The screen went black. Elena felt her stomach turn. They were using primates for brain experiments, merging human neural tissue with something else. Jason's voice was hoarse. And it worked. A sound echoed through the tunnel, soft, wet footsteps. They froze. Maybe it's Mark, Sam whispered. Jason shook his head. No. That's not him. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Elena turned her flashlight toward the corridor, and saw movement. A figure, crawling on all fours, dragging something behind it. The beam caught its face for an instant, part human, part ape, its eyes milky, its mouth moving soundlessly. Jason swung the machete. Run! They fled down the corridor, the creature screeching behind them. The hallway opened into a wider chamber, lined with cylindrical tanks filled with murky fluid. Inside each tank, shapes floated. Some were small. Some were human-sized. All of them twitched faintly as they passed, as if responding to their presence. Sam backed away, shaking. They're still alive. Elena stepped closer to one of the tanks. Inside, a body floated with wires embedded in its skull. The face was eerily familiar. Her breath caught, it was Mark. Not the infected version. This was him as he had been, whole, calm, asleep. A backup. Jason's voice trembled. They cloned them. They were replicating consciousness. A mechanical hiss cut through the air. The tanks began to bubble. Alarms blared weakly, echoing through the underground lab. They're waking up. Elena shouted. The glass cracked. One by one, the tanks began to burst, spilling fluid across the floor. Limbs twitched. Eyes fluttered open. Dozens of hybrid shapes writhed on the ground, gasping for air like newborn monsters. Jason grabbed Elena's arm. Go. Now. They ran through another door, the sounds of shrieking and glass breaking chasing them down the tunnel. The ground trembled as something massive stirred beneath them, a deep, slow rumble that vibrated through their bones. When they finally stopped, they found themselves in a vast cavern, its ceiling lost to darkness. In the center stood a cluster of massive biological structures, pulsing sacks of flesh and cables, breathing in unison. Elena's voice broke. It's still growing. Jason stared in horror. The lab didn't fail. It became the island. And then, from the darkness above, a single droplet of blood fell onto Elena's cheek. She looked up, straight into the face of a half-formed creature clinging to the ceiling, its mouth opening in a silent scream. The sound that followed shook the cave. It wasn't one creature. It was many. All awake. All connected. All hungry. The roar that erupted from the cavern wasn't just sound, it was vibration, fury, and hunger fused into one monstrous pulse that shook the air itself. Elena felt it deep in her ribs, like something clawing to get out. The hive was awake. The walls of the cavern seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythmic waves. The fleshy masses pulsed with a faint orange glow, veins of bioluminescence weaving through them like lightning trapped beneath skin. Somewhere beneath those layers of tissue and cable, machinery hummed, a grotesque mix of life and technology that defied every law of nature. Jason yanked Elena back as a section of the ceiling collapsed, sending shards of rock and fluid splattering across the floor. We have to move. Now. Sam stumbled after them, covering his mouth as the stench of rot and chemicals grew overwhelming. Where do we even go? We're surrounded. Elena's flashlight flickered across the floor, revealing movement, shadows crawling, twisting. Dozens of small shapes were emerging from the pools of liquid, deformed monkeys with translucent skin, their veins glowing faintly, their eyes blind yet locked onto the intruders. They didn't move like animals. They moved in unison. Jason gripped his machete. "Stay behind me." The creatures screamed as one. They charged. Jason swung hard, the blade slicing through the first one's neck. It fell, twitching, but another leapt over its body, landing on his back. He slammed against the wall, crushing it, only for 3 more to appear. Elena grabbed a metal pipe and swung wildly, hitting one across the face. Its jaw split open, but it didn't fall. It only shrieked louder, blood spraying in arcs that steamed when it hit the floor. "Run," she yelled. They bolted down a side tunnel, slipping on the slick ground. Behind them, the shrieks echoed, overlapping, like a chorus of fury. The tunnel twisted sharply, leading to what looked like an old elevator shaft. The doors were pried open, the inside coated in black sludge. Jason shone his flashlight down, it went deep. "Climb," he said. "No time to think." They grabbed the thick metal cables and began to descend, their fingers sliding on the cold, wet surface. Above them, the creatures screeched and began to follow, fast. Halfway down, Sam froze. "Something's moving below us." Elena looked down. The darkness shifted. A pair of red eyes blinked open directly beneath her. It was Mark. Or what was left of him. He was larger now, his bones stretched, his arms longer, his movements smooth and deliberate. When he opened his mouth, the voice that came out was no longer his own. "Elena." Her grip faltered. Jason reached for her. "Don't listen." Mark lunged upward, climbing the cables like a spider. His claws dug deep, tearing through the steel as he ascended. Jason dropped down, swinging the machete. The blade struck Mark's shoulder, but instead of blood, a thick black fluid poured out, sizzling where it hit the metal. Mark didn't flinch. He grabbed Jason by the throat, lifting him easily. "We are one," he whispered, his voice layered, as if hundreds spoke through him. Elena kicked at him, screaming. "Let him go." For a moment, Mark hesitated. Something flickered behind his eyes, a flash of the man he once was. Then the hive pulse throbbed again, and that humanity vanished. He threw Jason into the wall with a sickening crack. Elena and Sam reached the bottom, stumbling into another chamber. This one looked older, ancient. Fossilized bones lined the walls, intertwined with cables and veins of the organic network. The air was freezing, humming with unnatural life. In the center stood a massive cocoon, its surface translucent. Inside, something enormous shifted. Sam stared in horror. "What the hell is that?" Elena stepped closer, her flashlight trembling. Embedded in the membrane were faces, human faces. Some were screaming, some were still, all pressed into the flesh like flies trapped in amber. Suddenly, one of the faces moved. Its eyes opened. "Elena," it whispered. She screamed and stumbled backward. The cocoon began to tear. A blast of air knocked them off their feet as the membrane split open, spilling out fluid that steamed on contact with the ground. From within, a colossal arm emerged, covered in fur and skin that seemed half alive, half mechanical. The creature inside was waking. Jason staggered into the chamber, bleeding from his head. "We can't stop it," he said hoarsely. "It's part of the island. Killing it might kill everything." Sam's voice trembled. "Then what do we do?" Elena looked around frantically. The walls pulsed faster, veins throbbing in sync with the creature's heartbeat. Her flashlight caught an old generator panel in the corner, its lights flickering weakly. "We overload it," she said. "We burn it all." Jason nodded, already limping toward the console. He started pulling wires, sparks flying as the circuits overloaded. The cocoon's outer layer began to crack, revealing a distorted ape-like skull with too many eyes and teeth like blades. It let out a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Elena screamed over the noise. Hurry. The generator hummed louder, a high-pitched whine building. The air shimmered with static. Mark appeared at the edge of the chamber, his body twitching, torn between attack and hesitation. For a moment, his voice broke through the hive's whispers. "Elena, run." Then the light exploded. The shockwave ripped through the tunnels, tearing through flesh and stone alike. The roar of the hive turned into one long, shrieking note before cutting off completely. And then, silence. When Elena opened her eyes, the walls were still. Smoke and dust filled the air. The cocoon was split open and burning, its black blood hissing as it dissolved. Jason was alive but barely. Sam was unconscious beside him. Elena stood, swaying. "Is it over?" she whispered. From the shadows behind her, something moved. A hand, human. Trembling, reached toward her shoulder. "Elena." It was Mark's voice. But when she turned, there was no one there. Only a dark handprint, wet and pulsing, left on her arm. Smoke curled from the shattered cavern, turning the air thick and metallic. The faint crackle of burning flesh and circuitry echoed in the silence. Elena sat against a half-collapsed wall, her body trembling uncontrollably. Every breath she took stung her throat, heavy with ash and blood. The hive was dead, or at least, it looked dead. Jason lay nearby, his skin ghostly pale, chest rising in shallow, uneven movements. Sam hadn't woken yet, but his pulse was faint, alive enough to give Elena a reason not to collapse completely. "Jason," she croaked. "We did it. We stopped it." Jason's eyes opened slowly. For a second, they were clear. Then something flickered in them, something black and reflective. "Did we?" he whispered. A low hum answered from deep within the earth. Not loud this time, just a vibration. A heartbeat. The island was breathing again. Elena's body tensed. She turned toward the source, the cocoon, or what was left of it. The creature inside had burned, but the remains still pulsed faintly, like coals refusing to die. Every few seconds, a soft glow rippled through its veins. She forced herself up, gripping the wall for support. "It's not over. We have to get out before." Jason coughed, his voice wet. "Before what?" "Look around you. Everything's destroyed. There's nowhere left to run." She ignored him and limped toward the tunnel entrance. The air outside was thick and humid, glowing red under the dying sun. The once lush jungle now looked alien, leaves blackened, trees warped, vines moving as if breathing. The explosion hadn't killed the island. It had changed it. Behind her, she heard Jason move. The sound of shifting gravel, of something dragging itself closer. "Elena," he said softly. "Come here. Please." She turned. Jason was on his knees, staring at his hands. They were trembling violently, but not from weakness. The veins under his skin pulsed dark, branching like ink spreading through water. His fingernails blackened, curling upward. "Jason," her voice cracked. "No." He looked up at her, and his pupils had vanished. His eyes were entirely black. "It's inside me," he said, a smile breaking across his bloodied lips. "It didn't die with the hive. It moved." Elena stumbled back. "Fight it. You have to fight it." Jason's body convulsed. Bones cracked, tendons twisted, and a horrible wet sound filled the cavern. He screamed, a sound so raw it made her skin crawl. His back arched as if something beneath his skin was trying to crawl out. Then it did. His shoulder tore open, revealing coarse black fur pushing through the wound. His jaw extended, teeth snapping as his voice warped between a growl and a moan. "Don't run," he gasped between spasms. "It wants you." She turned and ran anyway, sprinting through the tunnel. Behind her, Jason's screams shifted into roars. The ground shook. Outside, the jungle twisted further, trees bending toward her, vines reaching out as if alive. The air vibrated with whispers, echoing. From nowhere and everywhere, join us. Become whole. She burst into the clearing where their camp once stood. The tents were gone, melted into the soil. The boat, their only escape, was overturned, half sunk in the shallows. And something was standing beside it. Mark. Or what was left of him. His body was now massive, his skin a patchwork of fur, metal, and sinew. His face was a nightmare, one side human, the other an animal skull. Yet his eyes were still Mark's. "Elena," he said softly, his voice layered and broken. "It's all one now. We're not separate. Not human. Not animal. Just evolution." He took a step forward. She backed away. "You're not Mark. You're it." He tilted his head, something almost sorrowful in his movements. "No. You are." The ground split open beneath her. The flesh-like roots from below burst through, wrapping around her ankles. She fell, screaming, as they coiled tighter, dragging her toward the pulsating soil. Mark knelt beside her, his monstrous face inches from hers. "Don't fight it. You'll see. You'll understand." Elena's hands clawed at the ground, grabbing a shard of broken glass from the wreckage. With a desperate cry, she drove it into his throat. Black blood poured out. He staggered, but instead of dying, he laughed, a wet, gurgling sound that turned into a chorus of whispers. "Now it's yours." The vines pulled harder, sinking into her skin, merging with her veins. Agony exploded through her body. Her vision blurred. She screamed until her voice gave out, the world dissolving into pulsing red light. Then, silence. When her eyes opened again, the pain was gone. She stood, slowly, the jungle swaying around her. The vines that had dragged her down were now part of her, woven into her flesh, pulsing gently. Her reflection in the shallow water was almost human, almost. She touched her face. Her skin rippled. Her eyes glowed faintly amber. From behind her, the jungle moved as one organism, whispering her name. "Elena." She smiled faintly. The hum beneath the earth grew stronger. The air vibrated with new life, wild, ancient, unstoppable. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the sound of waves broke against the shore. The island was awake. And so was she. As night fell, Elena stepped into the jungle, her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the island itself. In the darkness, something enormous stirred, answering her. The age of man had ended. The reign of the primate had begun.